Let's talk about the monetary policy decisions of the Central Bank of Nigeria, because the committee is expected to hold that policy rate unchanged at 13.5 when the two-day meeting ends tomorrow. But what are the key macroeconomic variables that the financial regulator and its members will consider in arriving at a raise, a cut, or a hold? Usually, those are the three options to choose from. Let's get ahead of the MPC now by bringing in Paul Alaje, who is a senior economist at SPM Professionals, for some insight. Paul joins me from our Lagos studio. Good evening. Good to see you again on the show.
Good evening, and thank you so very much for having me.
It's been a very eventful year so far. Well, maybe not perhaps as much as last year because of the pandemic, not as ravaging as it was last year in our climb. But what are the key macroeconomic environment that will be key to these decisions by MPC members as their meeting gets started today?
Quite a number of factors within the environment that the members need to consider. Recall that the members of Monetary Policy Committee have been considering quite a number of factors before now. Those factors will still matter. One of the factors will remain what is happening to security, what is happening to logistics, which could help either influence inflation if inflationary figure increases or reduces. So, but all of these factors will determine whether our rate would increase. So among which, when you look at general macro environment, macroeconomic environment within an economy, you want to talk about political environment, you want to talk about technological availability of technology, or you want to talk about social environment, you also may want to talk about cultural, and so on and so forth. Quite a number of things that you need to consider when it comes to a macroeconomic environment. But beyond all of these, the macroeconomic environment will have implication on some key macroeconomic variable, one of which includes what will happen to inflation. You know, inflation is a monetary policy dependent to a large extent, even though there could be non-monetary factors that could also induce inflation, as we have seen it. We also look at what is happening to trade policy, which could also affect exchange rate to a large extent. So all of these factors are the things that would determine what will go on in the mind of Monetary Policy Committee. Do we want to attract more investment? That is, when you look at our trade, which is another leg apart from monetary and fiscal, what will happen to trade? Do we think that we need to attract more investment today, or we say if we reduce rate, we may lose more foreign investment? Meanwhile, we are going to have reduced inflation. Inflation right now is 17.75%, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. So if we say we want to have reduced inflation, we have to trade it off, because economics is about trade-off. You cannot eat your cake and have it, or modern language, you cannot have your cake. you cannot eat your cake and have it, or you cannot have your cake and eat it. So if we say we want to now encourage high inflation because with high monetary policy committee rate, that is IMPR, I beg your pardon, we necessarily attract investment. So when we have when we have higher foreign direct investment, we may also have high inflation. Then we may decide to sit on the fence and allow the impact of the previous policy to be made. So all of this will determine on, do we think that investors have confidence and they are waiting for a relatively better rate for them to invest, to bring portfolio to Nigeria, or they will want inflation to reduce for those that are here already, or for Nigerians that are doing business? Or do we think food inflation has eased enough because of security? We have seen stability. These are factors that will be considered, that will be on the mind of the committee members, and it will help them in making decisions from tomorrow.
Well, how do you think the MPC should decide tomorrow?
Well, for me, I think MPC should sit on the fence, because when you ask me, inflation barely reduced from 17.9 to 17.75. So that is so marginal. You cannot depend on that. And when you look at growth rate, which is another key variable, key factor that Monetary Policy Committee needs to consider, we have not reached even 1%. And recall that the projection is that Nigeria is going to grow to about 2 or 3%. It depends on the international organization you want to look at, our local authority. Some are even saying maybe 4%, but we are still, according to the last report that we have from National Bureau of Statistics, what we have is 0.51%. So it is too delicate for Monetary Policy Committee to say let's increase or let's reduce. I will want Monetary Policy Committee one more time to sit on the fence to look at how events will turn, particularly when we see Q2 report and we can see part of Q3, so that we can make informed decision, perhaps in the next Monetary Policy Committee.
Yeah, the next meeting after tomorrow, will be in September. That'll be the second to the last for the year. The final one for the year will be sometime in November. So how effective do you think the monetary policy environment had been since the new year started? Remember, we were doing a whole lot of stimulus spending last year, not just in Nigeria, but around the world. A whole lot of corporate news are coming in good. But here is inflation, not just in Nigeria, in the US, elsewhere on the planet. European Union is looking at 2% new inflation targeting, because this whole money printing machine around the world everybody was printing money fast and furious. Don't let anybody deny it. Everybody was printing money. So we all printed money, we're spending it. Do you think it is time? Do you think we've had enough 6 months of this year to take a look at how this money had been spent and what the result will be before we look at the second half of the year?
Well, most of the money printed here in Nigeria found their way out of Nigeria. They did not contribute so much to our development.
How do you mean?
Although without printing
the
money,
how do you mean?
I will say that. I will explain that. Although without printing money, things would have been worse off. Without the intervention by central bank, it would have been a total mess for Nigeria. However, fiscal authority have not performed sufficiently enough. Because we do not have sufficient electricity, we do not have sufficient infrastructure, we have to import virtually everything. And the more you import, you are going to spend money you have earned in hard way, or the money you have printed, whichever method, whether you are state or federal government, and you want to spend, or household or firm. We need to ask ourselves, what component of our economic life is important? And that can be found in our net income from abroad, which is sizable, which is significant, which is huge. So we need by now to be looking at how do we promote exports and import substitution almost at the same time, so that some of the impact, like we have seen economy prosperity in some country, we have started seeing some level of improvement. Yes, Nigeria has also left recession, which is something that we should commend. 0.51% is better than minus 6.4% we were in Q2 2020. That's huge difference. But I am saying that we need to do more in making policy beyond central bank and beyond monetary policy committee. We need to do more in making policy that will lead to development. And to a large extent, fiscal authority and trade authority must take responsibilities.
Everyone must take responsibility. Everyone in the room must take responsibility. Let's get this previewing of July's MPC meeting a little bit further within the macroeconomic environment in the second half of the year. We've seen where we're coming from, but the question is, where are we going? Paul Alaje, stand by with us for more. When we return, we'll be right back into everyone. Welcome back to the conversation with Paul Alaje of SPM Professionals on the two-day Central Bank Monetary Policy meeting and the macroeconomic environment. Thank you so much, Paul. We've seen the first 6 months. Let's talk about the 6 months, the second half of the year. What type of specific macro and monetary policies and actions do you think the economy needs right now? The IMF is forecasting the Côte d'Ivoire just next door will be growing at about 6% this year, 6.5% next year. Whatever aggregate or whatever outlook you're looking for Nigeria is between 2% and 4%. That's the top end. So how do you deliver 4%? We're coming from 0.51%.
Well, I think we need to look at how to connect the dots. Look at maritime sector, particularly where we have Apapa relatively congested. We have One partially functional. How do we connect most of the activity in our port to the hinterland, particularly using rail? So for me, what Monetary Policy Committee should focus on, their policy should indirectly target or directly target should be infrastructure. And I think government of the day, this cannot be done alone by monetary authority. This is where we need fiscal responsibility. And I repeat, fiscal authority need to be more responsible in making this policy a reality for Monetary Policy Committee. And when you say infrastructure, this is evident in rail, road, and more importantly, our power sector, which is electricity. It is so central to that kind of development if you want to have it.
Well,
and if you ask me,
these are projects, Paul, that would take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line. I'm talking about the next 6 months. What do we need to spend time and money on very quickly right now to deliver between 2 and 4% GDP growth, that you're not going to build that rail in the next 6 months.
Quick fixes don't solve economic problems. But
they all come together to deliver the big story.
Exactly. But when you start providing, if you increase your power from what we have, 3,000 megawatts, and you even have investors come to Nigeria, the monies are going to stay with our banks. It's going to improve our economic outlook. And where should central bank focus attention? Anything that will make us attract investment without necessarily increasing inflation. It is very easy to say, but it's one of the most difficult tasks to perform in economics. That is what central bank, particularly monetary policy authority, should focus on. But this will not be achievable when we still have high import duties, when we still have that a lot of activities still go on an apapa, and a lot of people are finding it challenging, and insecurity is still very high. Unemployment figures, 33.3%. These are huge challenges that monetary policy authority may have, particularly as it affects change in Nigeria within 6 months. If you say we're looking at 4% GDP growth rate, Q1 already told us we have approximately 0.51% GDP growth rate. How do we jump by 3.5 between first quarter to the last quarter on an average of relatively 4%? It is very tough. It is better we have 2-3% GDP growth rate. I will not mind if we are sure that in the next 5 years, the least growth will be 10%. And how do we get it? Infrastructure, agriculture, health, and education. There is nothing we can do about it. Name all the countries that have our size or bigger than us and has huge population and have the largest GDP in their region. These are areas they are focused on, and Nigeria must do the same. Infrastructure, rail, apart from rail, power, and of course, and road. And most importantly, that must come immediately after that is agriculture. And I must also commend government, particularly what you have seen in Lagos, Ibadan, particularly rail line, which is second to none as far as Nigeria is concerned. And the edifice, particularly of the terminal, is second to none in West Africa. But how do we repeat this beyond the structures we are seeing? How can we support that Ministry of Transport, perhaps to do something more before the end of the tenure? Perhaps to connect Calabar to Port Harcourt and see what we have in Enugu all the way to Maiduguri, or Port Harcourt all the way to Maiduguri. How do we connect more and more Nigeria so that even if we are removing subsidy, which is very important because monies
that's
are drying up.
That's about going to, because we're sinking right now.
Exactly.
And we all need to agree that we're sinking because we're making so much money on one hand, and the pocket we're putting it is leaking at the other end. So we keep losing every penny that we put in there. And that's the problem, because we have so much subsidy right now in the energy sector, both for electricity and for fossil fuel. So in the middle of it, we're losing so much money that could have gone into critical infrastructure, perhaps lending to macro and small and medium enterprises. So how much more would you think the central bank can do in terms of helping the macro and small businesses moving further? They've done a lot last year,
yes.
But what would you like to see in the second half of the year, maybe out of this meeting?
I think central bank needs to double what he has done, and I think government of the day we need to support in that regard, thanks to some of the policies, supporting farmers, which was evident. For those in rice industry, we tell you that some of the meal would have been useless without the support of central bank throughout grower policy, as quite a number of policies central bank has done. We know there could be a form of challenge, human factor in some areas, but central bank needs to use this innovation to look at critical sector, such as I've mentioned earlier, to support and target operators within the sector. Health is one of the sectors central bank has targeted. We need more and more support in the reality of COVID-19 and find a way to support more and more businesses in agric, in health, education, and more importantly, in infrastructure. A country that wants to develop must focus on infrastructure, because without that, we'll remain big, small village.
I'll stick with the value chain, perhaps within agriculture. We'll talk to the agriculture folks from corporate farmers after the discussion with you. But again, if we're going to lend more to the MSMEs, what interest rate are you looking at? The central bank did 10%, went to 9%. Then we said, well, we can go do 5%. Do you think we can still take this a little bit further without necessarily pumping too much money into the system and waking the dragon called inflation?
Well, central bank already has a way of controlling money supply through different platforms, technical platforms they are doing. But I think that support for small businesses at 5% will be the way to go now, remembering that the quality of money in the hand of MSME continue to dwindle. And mention the MSME, one way or the other, directly or indirectly, it will still have to import some part of raw materials, either directly or indirectly, or buy from somebody that has imported. And when you look at what exchange rate was, it has a way, the value chain, it connects. And this is the reason, one of the reasons why I think it will be too in a haste for Monetary Policy Committee to increase monetary policy rates or reduce at this time. It would just be nice for us to observe one more time before we decide whether we want to increase or we want to reduce. But as we speak, I think 5% to 9% is a convenient corridor for small businesses to do. You see, giving money is not just what matters. All lenders are not lending to you against your interest rate or your collateral. It's your ability to pay. So those that wants to collect money must also come with an intention of paying back the money that they have collected. And we have started seeing some concerns even from state government not paying back loans as at when. And this is the biggest worry. This is what can collapse financial institution, whether central bank or commercial bank or say microfinance bank. Ability to pay back is what matters. So for me, I want to lend my voice to say small businesses, particularly micro businesses and small businesses without necessarily going through medium businesses. These two key sectors within MSME are those that need support, and we need to support them. Whether they are peasant farmers or whatever they do, government must give money to them, not just to eat, but to support their activities. Whether it is farming or petty trading, this is what authority must do. And I hope that central bank will continue this support, and perhaps government will support you to improve what they have done beyond 2020 so that we can see a much better 2021 fiscal year.
We thank you for your deep insights this evening. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Paul Alaje, Senior Economist at SPM Professionals. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
We
sir.
appreciate it.